next Monday, the tampering period opens, which really means free agency opens. They might not be able to sign on the dotted line, but the deals start to roll in and we start to hear about them. So we're a week away from that, and just the chess pieces on the board are just starting to line up. And last week we talked all about the quarterbacks, the dominoes, what could fall. And I think unsurprisingly, even though we theorised what could happen last week, Matthew Stafford ends up back with the Rams. It's a 2-year reorganised deal. Essentially, they let him go out and test the market. The market was the Giants or the Raiders. And like we talked about last week, if I can get just slightly less money, but stay with a team who are competing.
Still be on a contender. Why do you leave?
Yeah. Maybe that's better for my career. Turns out that Matt Stafford is a more sensible man than we maybe gave him credit for last week. So he stays with the Rams. They're also, they locked up their left tackle, Eric Jackson, so making moves, that team. But it has a big knock-on effect on the rest of those quarterbacks out there, right? I think we've broken down the Rams and we can talk more about them as the offseason goes on. They are a fascinating team, but the big piece initially for me, Aaron Rodgers, suddenly all of the talk is, right, where does he land? Those teams who thought they were going to go after Stafford, what's happening with him as the big other experienced quarterback out there, veteran guy, and also what does it mean for the number 1 overall pick? So let's start with Rodgers. The Giant sounds like it's now the new landing spot. He doesn't have to go far, stays in New Jersey, and just switches green for blue.
Yeah, but what are the Raiders? What are the Raiders going to do? I mean, Tom Brady has now struck out pretty big a couple times, right? I mean, it feels like maybe he got the head coach he wanted. I'm still not 100% sure of that.
No, they wanted Ben Johnson and to an extent Liam Cohen.
Right. Like that's how they're going to sell it. And well, at one point he wanted Bill Belichick. I mean, he was in that conversation. So Tom Brady strikes out with his head coach. You end up settling on Pete Carroll. But you can win with Pete Carroll. You can win 9 games with Pete Carroll in Las Vegas in a couple years. It all comes down to your quarterback. As we know, Will, he doesn't get his quarterback. Tom Brady, the $375 million TV man, can do everything. He should be able to leverage to get a veteran quarterback. And right now he's not being able to do that. So I look at the Raiders because Brady is going to want somebody. If I'm just going to give you my personal opinion. If I'm Aaron Rodgers, I stay as far away as I can from the New York Giants and New York. I mean, why would you want to deal with that again? You have to deal with it's the same media. Like, I've been there. I've covered that stuff. The same people, for the most part, that cover the Jets, except for the beat writers, are covering the Giants. It's the same market. There's no separation in there. You're dealing with the same TV people, the same bloggers, the same radio people who already don't like you. And the Giants aren't winning next year. You put Aaron Rodgers on the New York Giants. How many more wins does that get you? 1, 2, maybe 0, maybe less. If I'm Aaron Rodgers, I go to the Las Vegas Raiders. I put on the silver and black. I do 1 or 2 years. You're in a better environment. You're in the desert. Las Vegas is cool and hip now in its own Las Vegas way. It's been completely transformed. You're playing in a great stadium. You're in a dome. You're not having to deal with cold weather and all these elements, on and on. That's what I do. I don't think that happens, but that's what I would do. And then it's just a domino effect from where does it go from here. I don't think there's anybody out there right now that New York Giants can get who's a good quarterback. I don't think there's anybody that the Las Vegas Raiders can get who's a really good quarterback. Let's rank the top 32 quarterbacks in the NFL. Where is Aaron Rodgers right now for you? Not
even in the 32.
So you're right. He's 30. He's 31. He's 32. He's 34. Would you rather have Jameis Winston or Aaron Rodgers? So this is what we end up talking about. Like, where is Aaron Rodgers going to go? I don't really care where Aaron Rodgers goes because he sucks right now.
It sounds like Derek Carr probably is on his way out there, right? And actually, like, one of the piece of quarterback news that came down from these GM press conferences, etc., is that the Indianapolis Colts and Anthony Richardson, their plan is to go for a proper quarterback, not controversy. That's the
they're going to have a competition.
Competition is the right phrase.
So I love it. You draft the guy super high, higher than anybody thought he should go. He has issues. He has an injury. You can't really control him. He's got a lot of talent, but he's not professional enough at the quarterback position. And now after a couple years, you have to have a quarterback competition. I've never heard of that before. I don't want to go on a tangent, but I've never heard of that. You have a quarterback competition with your rookie quarterback because he's not ready to play. You don't do it in his 3rd year. That is absurd, but that is the Indianapolis Colts in 2025.
I think they make sense for Derek Carr. I think they also make sense for Kirk Cousins. Like, I think he is a piece in this. There will be teams. The Raiders are a team I think could convince themselves of this because Kirk Cousins is going to be released by the Falcons this week. Right?
100%.
As much as they save a little bit more by holding him till after June 1st, I think they will be decent human beings and release him and let him go out and try and get a job, right? And that basically means that, like Russell Wilson, he's available for pretty much the veteran minimum. Somebody can pay him like $1 million for this year and get maybe Kirk Cousins the second year off that injury might be back to being like that kind of average line.
I have more faith in Kirk Cousins right now than I do in Aaron Rodgers as a bridge quarterback. I agree with you.
If the Raiders get the 20th best quarterback in the NFL, that's going to be a big step up from Gardner Minshew. If, you know, I think Aaron Rodgers almost doesn't make sense anywhere in the league for me right now.
And he's not going to sign to be a backup. So he's either starting or he's walking away.
Oh, and you also know what he's said in recent days that's now coming out is that he'd really like Davante Adams to come with him to wherever he ends up going.
Move on from Davante Adams. He's also not any good anymore. I saw a report that the Jets, if they can't trade him, they're going to release him. So the Jets don't think that Davante Adams is good enough anymore. They don't need him. He's not mission essential. But Aaron Rodgers wants to keep dialing it back to 2015 or whatever. Dude, oh my gosh.
I saw something that was suggesting like somebody needs to do a late round pick swap that will bring Rodgers and Davante Adams to their team. Think about saying that in 2019.
Future sevenths in 2030, right? Like, I mean, come on. I would love if Aaron Rodgers could dial it back a few years, humble himself, like put in the, do the grind, do the grit. He looks like Nick Cage, right? In Con Air. He's ripped. He's got which he's done before. He's got the long scraggly hair, the white, we can't say, what those t-shirts used to be called, but he's got the white t-shirt you might wear in prison. Bring it. I'm just not convinced. He's so far up his own head right now, I won't say the other word, that I just am not convinced that he has the ability to do it. But this is where we're at. I mean, it's Kirk Cousins, it's Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, Russell Wilson. I mean, one of those guys are going to work out and maybe win you 7 or 8 or 9 games, but nobody's taking you to the Super Bowl, Will.
The Giants, I think, will be the team who convince themselves. It's just if Aaron Rodgers wants to go there. Because I do think that Joe Shane, Brian Daboll have found themselves in this bizarre situation where essentially they're rebuilding again. Year 3 was meant to be the year where when you started with a rebuild, year 3 was meant to be the year it all landed. They got screwed by the Daniel Jones contract that they almost had to sign into because they got to the playoffs. I mean, I've never seen a more obvious situation where they should have used a franchise tag and ended up dropping the ball on that. They have left themselves now where they've got an okay roster. Yeah. Like, you plug in Kirk Cousins, Jameis Winston, someone like that there, and there is a situation where they could win 10 games this season.
You've got you have a defense with some pieces. The problem is, again, you're in the NFC East. Who plays in the NFC East? Oh, yeah, the world champion Philadelphia Eagles, who are going to try to win it again next year. It's so difficult in the NFL, and the franchises, if you don't have your quarterback, you don't have the right GM, you don't have the right head coach, you don't have the right owner, if something is holding you back, and I just, for me, if I'm the New York Giants, you find the best bridge quarterback you can, and then you're drafting somebody. That's the ideal way to do it, whether it is Shedeur Sanders, whether it is, Cam Ward, and we're going to get into all of this, but I do think that what we saw in the Combine and going into pro days are really where it's at too. Like I've covered a ton of pro days. It's more of an accurate representation. It's not as artificial as the NFL Combine. You're basically doing the same things, but you're usually throwing to your receivers. You have that chemistry built up, so you're getting a little bit more of an accurate representation of what that quarterback would be like in a perfect environment, which you never have in the NFL. But for me, this also goes into the top of the draft because Cam Ward is. Talk to Simon Clancy about this, but Cam Ward is a question mark. I mean, Cam Ward might go number 1 overall, but Cam Ward, nothing about him says, oh, yes, he is a true number 1.
People have massively talked themselves into Cam Ward.
Which is what they do with the quarterbacks every year, and it either works out or it doesn't. But I've covered this enough now. I've covered this for 15 years. The quarterbacks end up, it's a funnel. And you have all these names, and the quarterbacks end up getting pushed to the top because everybody needs a young quarterback. There's a school of thought in the NFL, you're better off drafting a quarterback every single year, right? Because you're either going to trade them, they're going to take over, they become your backup, they're cheap at the time before you have to start paying them after the rookie contract. So who goes number 1? Where does Cam Ward go? Where does Shedeur Sanders go? Where does Jackson Dart go? Where does Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, all these things? But that all goes together. It's the open spots with the NFL free agency, but it's also, the open spots with the draft coming up, because those teams have to factor it in. If you're the New York Giants, you're not going gangbusters for Aaron Rodgers. if you believe that you're drafting Cam Ward, and then, do you believe that Cam Ward can be your week 1 starter this year?
From my perspective, I think that's where this draft gets most interesting, because the Titans are sat in this position where you've got Brian Callahan coming into year 2. You've got a new situation in the front office. They're not convinced by Will Levis. They've made that relatively clear, and I think that's. I don't think any of us are convinced by Will Levis. There's not a huge amount of talent either side of the ball. They took huge swings last offseason, going for people like L'Jarius Sneed and spending big money, and they behaved like a team who were in win now mode year 1.
Hey, which made no sense.
Now, I think they need to reset. And actually, if the Raiders at 6 want to offer them next year's first and maybe a second to move up from 6 to 1, because they have fallen in love with Cam Ward or Shador Sanders, I think you bite their hand off and go and get yourself 3 or 4 young pieces on cheap contracts for the next 4 years. If you're convinced that you can draft well, you're still going to get somebody's going to tumble to 6, maybe not Abdul Carter but somebody is going to fall to that level that you're going to be happy with. I'm really, even looking through, I think the number 1 pick becomes more interesting. I know the Giants have been in talks with it. I know the Raiders have been in talks for it. Even the Jets have been in talks for it.
What about the Dallas Cowboys? I mean, seriously, what about the Dallas Cowboys trading up to number 1
and going and taking Abdul Carter?
No. I don't take Abdul Carter with his maybe potential foot issue. I'm not trading up for that. If I'm Dallas and I'm Jerry Jones and you do trade up for number 1, I'm not saying that I would, but if you do, there's only one player to take. That's Shador Sanders. I'm very serious about that. You're taking Deion's son because you believe in him enough. That's the only reason. And it's not gonna take the biggest blockbuster of all time to trade up, because it's not that lucrative of a number 1 pick this year. Abdul Carter, everyone felt great about him on Wednesday, and by Thursday now he's a huge question mark because of the foot issue. We'll find out at Penn State's pro day for that. I think it's March 28th, and see how he works out and see how he does. But personally, I'm not trading up to take Abdul Carter when I can probably take him at number 3. There's no way. I'm not trading up for Cam Ward. I think the only person, Travis Hunter or Shador Sanders, 2 guys that have enough flashy upside, I could see somebody trading up for.
I still think Jerry Jones is too pig-headed and didn't talk at the combine. As you were saying, didn't roll up in his big bus and get all the media to turn up and interview him. And that's amazing from his perspective. But you've got this crazy cap number on Dak Prescott.
Oh, my gosh.
$89 million because of the way they ran the voyages and the way that they tried to push it into the future. I think they just end up renegotiating that deal, using the money that they free up to go and sign their guys, go and get Micah Parsons back onto the team, and then just end up as a 7-9 team, 8
with Brian Schottenheimer as their head coach. Yeah, and we do this all over again. That's where the Dallas. There's no way around it. We're going to be sitting here next year talking about the same thing with the Dallas Cowboys
Can we just pretend they don't exist until they win a playoff?
I'm fine with that. I'm fine. I would, for the Dallas Cowboys, I would take my old Johnny Manziel approach when I was covering all the Manziel mania and also all the chaos and the disaster that he became. Just like, I got to the point where I didn't want to write about Johnny Manziel anymore until something actually happened, and the next thing that happened was he was out of the league.